When I was the Prime Minister of Canada, I was often asked this question: why do you support Israel?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So you've seen the first part of the clip. I'm going to be running a running commentary involving this ex-Prime Minister and pretty much checking much of what he says. I want to caveat to everyone who sees this video about me critiquing the ex-Prime Minister, I am not a leftist. I am not one of these left liberal intellectuals that he accuses later on. I am actually very much a centre of the right. I just disagree with fabrications of the truth which many of the pro-Zionist organisations and their allies tend to infuriate to. First and foremost, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm the Irish Muslim. Welcome back to my page. Please like, share and comment. It does help the algorithm and it helps the message that I'm trying to portray of neutral, unbiased opinions to get across. To answer his first question, why do I not support Israel? The simple question is, Israel acts as an apartheid regime that has occupied a native population, destroyed their country and removed much of their proprietary rights. I will continue as we go through this video. Please keep watching these clips.
My response, in effect, was always the same. Why wouldn't I support Israel? Why wouldn't I support a fellow democratic nation where open elections, free speech, and religious tolerance are the everyday norm? Why wouldn't I support a country with a vibrant free press and an independent judiciary?
The state media of Israel is alive and kicking, and the state media does not get to criticise the war crimes that Israel engages in. And in fact, journalists are murdered by the IDF for questioning their war crimes. These are, again, a very clear nature of the behaviour of not a free nation and a free press. Though I would unfortunately disturb many of you, any of us live under a free press. If you go far enough and you press the buttons enough, these so-called liberal free democracies will censor you, regardless whether you like it or not. The judiciary system also locks up children. I wouldn't call that a fair and unbiased judiciary system when 6, 8, 10-year-olds are being imprisoned because they're Palestinians.
Why wouldn't I support a valuable trading partner and a wellspring of amazing technological innovation? Why wouldn't I support our most critical ally in the Middle East and in the international struggle against terrorism?
There it is again. Continual expectations and understanding that the Middle East cannot be allied with and that Muslims are by definition terrorists. Because you saw the countries he put round in orange to be hostile to the West. Muslims aren't hostile to the West. The West is hostile to the Middle East. The West acts as a invader, oil thief, city-destroying force. And because Israel wants these things to happen, wants its neighbours degraded, destroyed and damaged, of course these Western politicians are going to raison d'etre the abilities of our fellow Muslims. Have you noticed how subtle he is about this? Western people who see my video, please pay attention that all the Middle East are the bad guys and only Israel is the good guy. That is something to pay attention to, the ideological warfare.
In a rational world, in a world where simple common sense prevailed, the question, why do you support Israel, would be like asking, why do you support Australia or Canada? But we don't live in that rational common sense world. So the case for Israel has to be made over and over. I, for one, am happy to make it. Let me start with this. Every military action Israel has ever taken has been to protect itself. Israel is not an aggressor state. It's a defensive state. This has been true from its founding to this day.
And now we've entered the realms of right-wing fantasy. Israel is an aggressor state. Israel physically threatens to attack all of its neighbours. Israel has called for the carpet bombing of Iran multiple times. Israel occupies the West Bank. Israel has a military internal juntaship consisting of military checkpoints for Palestinian people living inside the West Bank. Israel has an open-air prison where they prevent air, power, water and everything else coming into Gaza, even after he mentions later on that Gaza has been withdrawn. They haven't withdrawn. They've cut off water, air, power. You can't get ships in there. The enclave isn't some kind of free society where they can build their homes, look after their fucking children, when knocker missiles are the most moral armoured weapon out there. Who the fuck are you joking, Prime Minister? But the problem being is mass murdering states that are given a free pass because of what Germany did to them in the 1930s is the reason why many of you right-wing politicians lack the backbone to say what needs to be said. The abuse given to Israel in the 1930s are still playing out on the Palestinians today. And because there are the guilt of Western society and Germany and everyone else is an example of allowing them to commit these forms of internal harm on another nation of people. Another native people. A people who were on that land for 300 years and have nothing to do with the Romans ejecting the Jews thousands of years ago. Nothing. Not a sausage. The Muslim communities, let's be internationally neutral, the Arab, I prefer to call them Palestinians, but as I'm trying to approach you, the Arab population of the Middle East have nothing to do with the Roman ejection of the Jews. And don't even get me started on that fucking travesty of history called the Balfour Accord. What justifiable legal right does the British Empire have in creating the Israeli state without creating the Palestinian state? Well, we know the answer to that question, don't we? Because somebody paid them.
As a fledgling nation in 1948, Israel was immediately attacked by its Arab neighbors. Their goal was not to contain the tiny new country. It was to annihilate it. No nation came to Israel's aid. Not the United States, not my country, Canada, not the United Kingdom. No one.
Now, let us address this fantasy that Israel's first war was defended solely by the Israelis. Yes, the Israeli troops and infantry were the ones defending themselves. But you only have to look at how the Ukraine is defending itself by itself today to know exactly how the West supported Israel. Arms, weapons, equipment. The British fucking Empire left them brigades of vehicles. Israel was given enormous support from the West, but it was hidden. It wasn't soldiers, it wasn't armies. And this detritus of a politician goes on to talk about the next conflicts, going on and on about how Israel has defended itself all this time. Every single time, Britain has sent weapons, France has sent weapons, America has sent weapons, armour, equipment, grenades, missiles. During the phosphorus bombardments of the Gaza strips, the Israelis appealed on public fucking news, was mentioned on the BBC. I don't know how many years ago the phosphorus bombings were. For more phosphorus bombs from America. We all know who's arming these people. We all know who's responsible for these equipments.
They all thought Israel would lose, but it didn't lose. It won. In 1967, Israel's neighbors again sought to utterly destroy the Jewish state, a nation that had then existed for 2 decades. Again, Israel prevailed, and it survived another all-out attack in 1973. Those are the big wars, but I'm not sure there's been a single day in Israel's entire history when some act of terror has not been waged against it, inside or outside its borders. There have been 2 bloody waves of terror, so-called intifadas, in the late 1980s and the early 2000s, when Israelis were blown up on buses, at pizza parlors, and celebrating weddings. There have been incursions from terror groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon. There have been thousands of rocket attacks from Hamas in the Gaza Strip, even after Israel completely withdrew from that territory in 2005.
Do you notice how he dresses down the intifadas? Do you notice how he glosses over why there are waves of discontent by the Palestinian population at this time period. He doesn't go into details. He doesn't mention the police state behaviour in the West Bank, the military checkpoints, the open air prison that has existed inside of Gaza now for going on for decades at now time period. The intifaras are reactions to the criminal behaviour of the Israeli state, the depopulation of people from their homes, the destruction of their very livelihood, olive trees being dug up, anything and everything. They have been used and abused for decades, since the 60s, probably earlier than that, maybe the 40s, but since the 60s, which we have recorded international conversation about, we know that the Israelis have abused, mistreated, dehomed, removed, thrown out millions of Palestinians. Millions of Palestinians cannot go home. The West Bank is disbarred from them, even though they have family homes there. This is an important point to make. There is absolutely no way that this right-wing's lunatic politician would have any way, shape or form conversational about the Intifada's reasons. Now, I condemn Hamas, I condemn Hezbollah, any act of terrorism is to be condemned. But to look into the reason behind the Intifadas is far more important. And people don't want to do that. They just want to say Palestinians are bad, Israelis are good. No, the Middle Eastern conflict is fuckload more complicated than this. But a right-wing lunatic politician like this just spews his hate about how the Palestinians are bad people. And I remind you, as I said earlier in these clips, of how this individual assumes all Muslims are terrorists. Because he made that link, didn't he? He had the picture of the multiple countries, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, and then he added and terrorism, giving the very clear signal psychological link behind this. And these are the reasons why Western right-wing politicians should not be allowed anywhere near the Middle East at any point, at any time. Now, I closed this conversation by saying something moderately controversial, even as a Muslim. The Jewish people, their religion, much of their society is built around the return to the Holy Land. These are things we have to acknowledge. But I close my conversation by, how has any of this been the fault of the Palestinian people who have been living there for close to nearly 300 years comfortably, because the Crusades ended centuries and centuries ago, with no interference, no mistreatment. The Jewish community was left alone in perfect harmony up and down the caliphate. It was only when modern Zionism came into play that we now see the abuse, the country building, the breaking of the caliphate, the brickmanship made by Western powers, the disregard towards the Palestinian people and their right to self-determination. These are the problems. And this all stems from the British Empire and the Balfour Accord. And this is why I fundamentally have a problem with this statement, because this man doesn't want to address the problems. He doesn't want to address the issues that underlie all of this conflict. He wants to whitewash it. Oh, I support Israel, as if it was supporting Australia. No, it's not. Australia isn't going about its business depopulating, removing the homes and destroying the lives of an indigenous people. They have, and now they're trying to fix that problem, but Australia recognises it has done so. So is his homeland of Canada. The indigenous people are starting to get reparations. They're starting to get their lands back, unlike America, where, we still have those problems. But the fact, the reality of much of the crimes committed by the British Empire are still reverberating in today's society. They are still playing out in today's society. And the Intifadas are unquestionably cause and effect from the Balfour Accord that none of these right-wing politicians want to talk about. And we must remain vigilant on the course of providing every need and humanitarian aid we can to our Palestinian brothers and sisters. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope my at some point heated disagreement of this gentleman's detritus has benefited you. As always, if you like my content, please comment, share, and please give a like. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.